No stream yet. There it goes. Finally. All right, I'm live.
Todd and Rob in the afternoon.
Afternoon delight.
With Todd and Rob. Oh, yeah.
Todd, we're actually back in the afternoon now, so I guess that
Yeah.
makes more sense now.
And I'm sitting in very sunny southern Michigan and not jet lagging too hard. Been home under 48 hours, so doing
so
okay.
you've gotten set up good. Looks good.
Well, don't mind the mess behind me. Of course, you don't want to see the boxes and computer monitors and just here's the funny thing. When you tear down a studio that's about 1,400 square feet and literally 24 hours, and you pack the boxes, we should have hired some kid to come in and just write on the boxes what they are, because I have a box of cables, LAN cables, everything you can imagine. Do you think I can find that box?
Of course not.
Of course not. And I have no idea where it's at. So I'm going to the storage unit after the show today to see if I can find that box.
Oh, well.
Yeah, to be able to.
Todd. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's even more funny is I rented the storage unit right next to it, so that because the other one's so full, I need a place to sort. So I'm going to be sorting in the other unit.
All right.
And yeah, so anyway, I have a plan. So maybe next week or the week after, maybe there'll be something to show.
So are you planning on building your kind of new production place there in the same place you're at right now?
It's going to be right over there.
Oh, it's going to be in a different location than you are right now.
No, it's going to be in this room, but right over there.
Yeah, but in a different, right?
Yeah, this
visual screen area, right?
Yeah, this loft is a loft. It's 2,000 square feet of open floor plan. So
got it.
Yeah.
Well, we're lucky to have Mr. Dave Jackson with us. Dave, thanks for taking some time out today. I know you're in the middle of transition, and it's exciting to hear your new role as the head of podcasting at Podpage. So I thought it was a good time to have you come on, and since you're kind of free of the Libsyn world, but some things are going to stay the same with you, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of things. I'll still be going to events. I still have the School of Podcasting. The biggest difference, and because when I said I was leaving, people were like, "Oh, what's wrong with Libsyn?" I'm like, "There's nothing wrong with Libsyn. They're same great people over there." But I kept moving. I kept taking new positions that just got me further and further away from really what I like to do, which is work one-on-one with people or I was working more with companies than like podcasters. And on one hand, yeah, that company's a podcast, and I was working with, they have the apps that we have for people. So I was working with Apple and Google a lot, and that is not always a picnic. And if I could rewind it, the one thing I go, I could have done that. That would have been nicer. Is I should have gone to Libsyn and said, I'm really not happy with what I'm doing. Can we find something else for me to do? But instead, and I have a brain tattoo. I got on a meeting with Rob, who I've known for, like you guys, I've known him for 19 years. Yeah. And I said, yeah, I'm leaving. And I just watched my words just clock him in the face like nobody's business. And he was
like, because you know what he has to do.
Well, he has to replace me, but he's got to find somebody else.
It's going to be hard to replace you, Dave. Just realize that, right?
Yeah. Todd has an "or" in there, or no,
yeah.
Okay.
So
so where are we going with that?
You guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
We just you just kept going "or," and we're like, yes.
Yeah, I hit a button and I went deaf on my side for a second, so that's why I had to pause. Okay. Never make a change on the StreamYard midstream. I found that out the hard way last time. I guess the question really is, are you much calmer now away from the the chaos of Libsyn? Is it
There
because there's
wasn't-
only
Well,
you
that
only
was a
have two
leading question, Todd.
you only
Yeah.
have two people. It's just you and another guy, which has got to be a beautiful thing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't chaos. They've got some things cooking. You know, I promised I wouldn't reveal what's coming from Libsyn, but they've got some things that are, you know, they've and there was one I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Now that's the Libsyn I know and love. There was a new way of looking at things that's on the way. So
Oh,
that's going to be fun. But yeah, so it was, I just kept telling them, I was like, it's not really it's not the company, it's what I'm doing, and I want to do that. That looks like
Sure.
much more fun. And the other
Yeah.
thing is that kind of like when I joined Libsyn, there were probably 15 people there.
yeah.
And now there's like 40 or 50. And so where like today, I went and I saw the same question come through in support. And I was like, do we have a help, like, you know, some sort of tutorial on this? And I'm like, oh, no, we don't. Hold on. And there it is. I didn't have to send this to a person who then
Right.
approved it, who went to the thing. And then it's like, it's nice to kind of be back in like, and really when I joined Libsyn, it was like a really super serious startup. I mean, we didn't even have an HR person at that point. And so it's kind of fun to be back in that, like, hey, if you want to do it, do it. Here's the tools, go ahead. So
Yeah.
that's a little more fun. So again, it's nothing wrong with Libsyn. They're fine. And if you want advertising, they've got Libsyn ads and all the other fun things they got going over there. Just for me, I said it's like chocolate ice cream. Love chocolate ice cream. It shows, you know, but I really cookies and cream I will stop every time. And
Well, you
know.
got the keys to the car now, and here's the best part. On the School of Podcasting, you still can now start promoting Blubrry as a podcast host and collect your affiliate money.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
And one of the first calls I got was from Brendan from Podpage. It's like, hey, now that you don't work for Libsyn, like we can actually work together. And Blubrry is the one I had courses in at the School of Podcasting. I've always had Libsyn, Blubrry, Buzzsprout, and Captivate. And when you guys changed your dashboard, I'm like, oh, all my tutorials are out of date. And then you kept adding so much stuff. So now that you've kind of calmed down a little bit, although every time I turn around, there's like, no, there's another this thing, and
That's right. You can never get it built. So
yeah,
it's accurate,
I gotta go back and redo my Blubrry stuff because
But the good thing, everything's modular now, so it's just an additional thing. It's not like a whole gutting the, you know. So it's just, you know, little bits and pieces are being added here and there.
well, I've learned that in the early days of the School of Podcasting, I do like a 20-minute video and just go over every part of like PowerPress at the time.
Yeah.
And then I learned, I'm like, let's have one video per tab.
Yeah.
And that way, when they make that one change to that tab, I can update it in that whole 9 yards. And of course, now, of course, you still have PowerPress, but you've really updated your dashboard so that if you're not using PowerPress, you know, you can do all the fun stuff just as well. So
Just let me know, Dave. I'll matter of fact, I'll go into your account and I'll give you the whole enchilada, so that way when you go in, you can see everything.
yeah. So it's been a fun transition, and this has been like the tour. Like I literally just got off a call that Podfest was putting on, and you know, so we had the big announcement there. And then on the day before that, what is today? Thursday, Wednesday. So Monday, we had a town hall with Podpage. So every time I turn around in the middle of the day, I'm just hopping on a webinar. So I'm having a blast. So it's been a lot of fun.
Oh, good. You know, I understand the ability to have, I call it mobility, you know, because in the early days I would just do something now, and it wasn't necessarily right. It probably needed a copywriter and, you know, a whole bunch of other stuff now. But with great tools like Grammarly and everything else is out there, I think even, you know, someone that isn't and I'm not a proficient writer, and by any means, those tools just makes it easier to be solo and not have to run through 3 layers of bureaucracy to get something done. And there's
Yeah.
something to be said to that. You
Well,
move
and
fast.
Yeah, and for me, I always write something, save it as a draft, give it 24 hours, and then come back and, you know, there are things you can do. I learned in the past you can actually read your article backwards, and you'll catch spelling typos that way because you're losing the context. So there's that, and like Todd said, with Grammarly and all the other ones, you know, I usually catch everything, but I'll save it as a draft, come back the next day with fresh eyes, and it's amazing. Sometimes you'll be like, what was I thinking in this sentence? It doesn't even make any sense. So
Right.
that's always fun.
Yeah, Dave, I think there is a aspect of what you built and what you've been doing in the podcasting space that is really, really, I think, in the bigger picture, kind of unique, because You've been able to build the School of Podcasting, which has put you in a position of being kind of, a fair broker across all players in the industry, but yet you've been working for one company at the same time, which oftentimes puts any of us in a situation where we're primarily expected to toe the company line, right? And only talk about
Yeah.
what's great about the company I'm working for. And the problem nowadays is that people question that from the standpoint, are you a fair broker about trying to really help people make the right choices? And that's been something I've tried to do with my own career. And it does put you in a difficult position with your employer at times. And I'm just curious, what's your experience with that? I know that
Yeah.
Brendan kind of mentioned that as well, is that you've been able to, talk honestly about Blubrry, talk honestly about Libsyn, talk honestly about all these other platforms. At the same time, you've been able to maintain an employment relationship.
I've always just done, because that's the one thing he said. He said, I've been a huge Podpage fan for years. And he goes, and now when I say, oh, you should try Podpage, people are going to go, oh, it's because you work there. And
Right.
I'm like, well, look at the past, 80 episodes or whatever. But what I used to do with when I worked for Libsyn, I'd be like, okay, here's Libsyn's price, and here are the features you get. Here's Blubrry, and here's the the thing. So if you're on WordPress back in the day, I'd say if you're on WordPress, this makes it like super easy. Go check out Blubrry, and then here's Buzzsprout, and then here's Captivate, and here's what they all do. And depending on what the person wanted, especially if they wanted dynamic stuff, I'm like, okay, well, Blubrry has a pre-roll, Buzzsprout has a pre and post, and then they put in the mid rolls wherever they put them. And then Captivate lets you do all that, and you get to pick and go, and Captivate's a completely different business model, et cetera. And I would just say, here's what it is. Any questions on that? Then if they had questions, I'd answer. And if they picked Libsyn, great, I'll probably answer your ticket. And if not, okay, go ahead. That's, it's because in the end, I always say every podcaster starts with two things. One, no audience, and two, integrity. And the goal is to grow your audience without losing your integrity. So if I said, oh yeah, go ahead and sign up at Libsyn, and somebody had 4 shows, well, there's, depending on if they wanted all the stats and that, there's 20, 20, 20, and 20. And then they find out that, wait, I could be on Transistor or Captivate and only pay $20. They're going to be mad at me.
Right.
Like, why didn't you tell me about that? And I'm like, well, it's an op, I just, so I was like, it's one of those things where I've worked for a number of companies. I mean, I worked 10 years at the first company I had where I was doing a lot of training. And then I worked at a New Horizons Computer Center where I was doing more training. But in both those cases, for whatever reason, the music stopped, and we're really sorry, Dave, you're one of our best employees, but we got to let you go. And so that kind of gives you a little PTSD, a little bit. You're kind of like, you always think, oh, they'd never let me go. And my first job, I was going to leave, and the CEO came into my office. The CEO is like, I thought you were untouchable, yada, yada. This is stupid. They're going to just blah, blah. And he was really mad at me. And I'm like, okay, I'll stay. And then they let me go like 9 months later. And that's when I was like, okay. So, and it wasn't that I was worried about being let off or let go from Libsyn. I've just always, that's why I still have the School of Podcasting. I mean, if I get fired tomorrow from Podpage, I'll be eating a little ramen noodle because I work that job part-time. So it makes a part-time income, but it's always my cushion. So I've always just kind of like, there just comes a time when you're like, all right, how can I
be happy?
Yeah, like this is going to be happy. Well, I remember, I mean, not, my ex-wife is a fine human being, but it took me a while. I moved back to Akron. I used to live in Cleveland with her. And this one night I sat down and I was like, man, this is just weird. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, I remember this. I'm happy. Like, I wasn't dreading coming home. I wasn't kind of waiting for someone to yell at me, And so, and again, I wasn't super unhappy at Libsyn. It wasn't like I was dreading going to work. I just was like, oh, that sounds like the stuff I used to do. Like, I would do webinars for Libsyn, and I was like, oh, I would love to do these every day. This would be great. And they did. I asked them, I said, can I do coaching? I pitched them, and they gave me 1 day a month. Well, at Podpage, I'm doing 5 days a week. There's a couple of times every day. So it's just, I'm like, that's what I do. That's really, and then today I was on with someone, and I went over and looked at their website. And here's a fun tip, because I bet you're doing this one. if I Google your name podcast and it doesn't come up, I bet if I go to your about page, you wrote it in first person and never mentioned your name. I've done that before. And I went over and she was like, our co-host Susan does this and this and this, and I do this. And I go, you need to put I parentheses your name. I said, because if people are Googling your name and it's not on your website, it's not going to show up. And she's like, that's a really good tip. And I go, I see it all the time. So
Every day of the week.
yeah, so it's been fun. It's you know, and I'll still be at all the events. The thing I like about this is Brendan just gave me a budget, and he's like, okay, you go to the events you want. Where, and again, nothing wrong with Libsyn. They got a marketing department, and they got all sorts of things going on. But I have to kind of go in and say, all right, here's where I want to go. Here's how much it's going to cost, and then they would say yay or nay. And if they said nay, I'd be like, fine. Then the School of Podcasting is paying, and I'm still going. So it's going to be kind of that with Podpage as well. So.
You know, Dave, I think there's one thing that we have to recognize, and Tom made a comment in the chat channel, and it kind of triggered me a little bit. So it says, I am a big fan of Dave and what he has done for the space. He is generally someone I admire for his commitment to podcasters and the growth of space. He is a real star. And I agree with Tom, you know, I mean, we've all been friends in this space for many, many years. And I think in the end, what it boils down to, I think there is a core group of podcast personalities. You know, Rob, you've bounced around a bunch of places. You know, I've pretty much been same place from the beginning. But Dave, you know, you're on, you know, you moved around a little bit. But in the core, the core of who we are and the core of what we want for podcasters to achieve is the same. We want them to succeed. We want them to grow their shows. We want them to have good advice. And I think there's probably a small core of folks that beyond their businesses are really concerned for the community as a whole. Now, I might be wrong, but, you know, I just, you know, you've been a great person for helping, you know, you'll stop and talk to anybody. And I think we all will do that. But at the same time, I don't know if that's necessarily true for everyone that is coming to the podcasting space later. I might be a little harsh and being a little bit unfair, but I just know what I know.
I think
there's
you hit the nail on the-
exceptions, Todd. There's
Yeah.
exceptions to that, right?
But it's one thing to be, you know, a quote podcast consultant, but you also have to realize you're in podcasting. And if I see things that I'm like, wait a minute, this is going to hurt the industry. And there are different bubbles. Like there's the advertising people that are just killing it and they got the CPMs going out through the windows. That's awesome. So when I see an app that comes out that, okay, it's paying the podcaster kind of, you know, it's the delivering an ad-free solution to the listener. Okay, that's a win-win. And let's see, the advertiser who's paying to get their message into the ears of your audience get screwed. And I'm like, I believe that's called fraud. If you take money and say, I'm going to deliver your message to my audience's ears. And I was like, yeah. So when I see stuff like that, nothing against the guy. When I heard the conversation with him, he just sounds like a young kid that went, I wonder if I could do this. And he did. And I was like, yeah, but that's, and I've seen stuff like that. I've seen the different, anytime, I shouldn't say anytime, there may be times when you see these people that are like, hey, we have a service for you guaranteed. That's always a fun word, to grow your audience and blah, blah, blah. And then we send people to a website, you know, with our player. And I'm like, red flag right there.
Right,
Hold on.
right.
You know, and it just, again, I interviewed somebody. He was giving me a demo. And at the end I said, hey, can I play this for Lips? And he's like, oh, please do. And I just felt like going, do you not know they own an advertising company? Because I said, what happens when you turn off the campaign? He goes, oh, it's catastrophic. It's just Niagara Falls. And I was like, okay, that sounds, sure smells like fraud. I don't know. It could be, maybe that's too strong a word. So when I see things like that, you know, I stop myself like I had a guy today that spammed one of my students, and it started off with, hey there. And then it was like, you know, love your show, blah, blah, you know, the generic thing. And I was like, man, I kind of like that guy. And you're doing that to people. And I stopped myself because I just want to start I don't know, a website like callthemout.com or something, and just like, all right, here's another one, and here's what they said, and here's what they said. But I'm like, well, I do enough of sharing my opinions and where it's not always wanted. But I was like, there are times I would just love to call people and now like, don't use these people. I had somebody today pitched some sort of home repair expert to the School of Podcasting. And they thought he'd be a great, addition to bring value to my audience. And I was so tempted to go, how the heck is this guy going to deliver? So those are the people I just want to go out to the mountain and go. I did once. I went to somebody, same thing. They pitched a real estate person to the School of Podcasting, and I went to the actual guest that they were promoting. So let's say Todd hires somebody to, go out and get me on podcasts. And I went back to Todd and said, hey, the person you hired just pitched you to me, and I am not a good fit. So you might want to think about, getting a
Hiring
refund.
them.
Yeah. And I was like, snitches get stitches kind of thing. But I was like, hey, if it was my money that I would spend. And so those are the kind of things I would love to just blow the whistle on everyone. But I would do nothing but that then, because there's so much of just the scraping emails. And I don't really do much on LinkedIn, because every time I logged into LinkedIn, it's just pop-up windows, and I'm a Apple podcast promoter, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, you're constantly getting pitched, right?
Do you have a podcast? And that's where my ego wants to scream, do you know who I am?
Right. They don't actually, and they don't do any research.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. Right. So, yeah. So it's just, that's what I try to do. I mean, because if we don't protect the podcasting space, well, then I got nothing to consult in. So I always keep my eye on that. And that's why when you said Tom, was that Tom Webster?
Yeah, Tom Webster.
Yeah. So I love Tom Webster, because he keeps me informed on that bubble, because I'm not a 100,000 downloads kind of thing.
He also says, yes, Dave, thank you for saying that. And that comment came in right around the time you were talking about the app that was removing the ads. Yeah.
So it's just, we got to watch out, because, some people could care less about advertisers, but there are a lot of people, Jordan Harbinger cares about advertisers, and Scott Johnson and a bunch of other people I know. So we got to take care of those people. At the same time, we're still looking for ways for that person who's getting 1,000 downloads to, now that person may have to realize that, maybe making a living on 1,000 downloads might be a little harder than you think it is, but
unless you're a neurosurgeon.
Exactly. Right. And so I try to, and there's so many bubbles that I don't even know. Like, Todd, where did you go? You went to some, it was in the Middle East.
Yeah, I went to Riyadh.
Yeah. And you just learn, Chris was telling me about the Philippines. There are all these little bubbles that are exploding that I have no clue about. I'm not up on that stuff, but then that's where I, lean on James Cridlin to keep me informed of what's going on. Because you never know. It's like from Guatemala,
I know he's all over the place, right?
He's in some airport. You're like, what?
Yeah.
As much as he complains about not getting upgrades, he should have enough miles to get upgrades based on how much flying he's doing.
Yeah. I'm sure he does.
Yeah, but
Dave, I thought it was interesting your relationship with Podpage around podcast coaching and working with elite members. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's our top tier. So you have basic, and then pro, and then elite. And so what we're doing there is we're just having another webinar, and that might be because the elite plan is where the SEO tools kick in. So we're going to have some more kind of SEO related stuff and things of that nature for that kind of people. Because again, there are some people are just doing it for fun, and they're talking about Batman in the basement, and they're not going to go for that plan. They want for the cheaper plan or whatever. And so, but those people that are doing elite, these are people that like, I want to get some traffic to my website. I want to do that. But we are still offering, right now we're offering coaching to just about anybody, just to, see what the interest is and go from there. And it's a new thing. So we're kind of making it up as we go along. Eventually there will be some sort of Podpage podcast, because, our audience is podcasters. So
right.
Go where your audience is. So we still are trying to figure out what that's going to be. Because if it's just Podpage updates, that's fine for our customers, but not so much for the general non-Podpage customer yet. So we're trying to figure out what that is. But that's where, like any business, you're like, okay, what kind of podcast would my customers listen to? Let's make that, and then we'll just be the sponsor of our own show.
So would that be a one-on-one coaching relationship, or because I know that you're also going to be doing a monthly webinar too.
Yeah. So we do webinars, and then we do one-on-one coaching. And then, like, I had someone today, domains can be a little tricky if you're new to anything, domains, and you're like, a C name of a what? And
Right.
so I just sent this person a link. I said, here, let's schedule a quick time on Zoom. And it actually, as much as you think, well, that's going to chew up 15 minutes of your time, I would have spent 15 minutes going back, going, no, click on this, and then go to the edit menu, look for domains, and then they send back, I don't see it. Then you take a screenshot, and then you send them a Loom video. It's like, hey, let's just jump on Zoom for 10 seconds and let me walk you through this.
Right.
Yeah. And that was just Brendan's idea. He's like, he goes, we didn't have bad support. We just want to take it to a next level. And I know Blubrry, you can call and schedule a time with Mike. So it's that kind of stuff where it's like, we can't just have somebody, jump into, we did today, but it was just one where it's like, hey, I'm available right now. If you got a second, click this link.
The way I kind of refer to it is sometimes you just need to call a friend.
Yeah. Well,
that's
the
kind of what you are doing with Dave, right? Yeah.
and well, the person I was talking to, she says, man, it's so good to have a Dave. Every company needs a Dave. And I was like, well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So, and the other thing that's, to me, that just makes it a deeper connection is when you can see who your audience is. You're like, oh, this is a woman that's probably about my age, and technology is not her thing. But I'll tell you what, she was a sharp cookie, and so don't let the gray hair fool you, people. Where all these boomers are not as dumb as you think they are. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. And then, like I said, she just said a couple of things. I'd spent 4 minutes looking at her website. I said, well, we got a little time before, because it was only 15 minutes. I said, let me look at your website for 2 seconds. And I saw that her name wasn't on her about page. And she was like, oh, that's a really good tip. And I go, I think so. And so off she went. So to me, the fact that she was like, wow, this is amazing that this company is offering this. B, I got her problem solved in 2 seconds instead of, 2 hours. And I got a little insight into who our customer is. And hey, speaking of Tom Webster, one of the things you got to be reading is the audience is listening, because the whole key to this is knowing who your audience is. And when you know who your audience is, you can deliver the best content. And, with PodPage, we're always trying to figure out, okay, what can we do better? What can we, a new feature, things like that. And it's the same thing with a podcast. The thing that drives me, I'm a little too logical at times. And so when I see somebody in a Facebook group going, how do I grow my audience? And I go, well, did you do any kind of, preview? Did you get any feedback from someone not named Mom? And they either don't answer because they know the answer is no, I didn't. Or if they do, it's like, well, my brother said it was good. And I was like, okay, but we got to figure out if it resonates. Because if it was a restaurant and people would show up on your grand opening and then they never come back, okay, maybe somebody should check the food and see if it's any good, and that it just, on one hand, I get it. We're just doing it for fun, man. I just want to talk about, that movie on Netflix. Okay, that's perfectly fine. But it's when that person turns around and goes, how do I get sponsors? I'm like, time out. That's when you got to take this a little more seriously. And it just seems like, I offer that. That's a service I offer at the School of Podcasting. And I'll go up to people. I'm like, hey, like, you got something for me to listen to? Oh, not yet. And I look and they're like, they got 7 episodes out. I'm like, wouldn't you want to know? Like, if I've got broccoli in my teeth, I want somebody to go, you got broccoli in your teeth. And I'm like, oh, good to know. All right, let me get that. As opposed to just keeping it out there and then going, why doesn't anybody want this? But that's just that is something that will baffle me forever. I don't know. Do you see that, Todd or Rob, or people just don't seem to get feedback or want feedback?
I think they don't get feedback. And sometimes they're not asking for feedback. But at the same time, they're especially when they're new, they're just trying to get battle rhythm down and figure out what they're doing. And, they don't have 20 years of publishing episodes to know, okay, this comes, you have to do this, and this. They're worried about, do I need to take the ums and ahs out of their editing? There's a lot to comprehend. There's a lot. And so people are not, that they knock the podcast out and they put it up and they, I got the episode out, woohoo. And they don't really think it's hard because there's so many facets of this space. And, it kind of ties into what Jim says. Jim said in the chat, he said, Todd, you were right. All three of you are friends of podcasts. The spirit is far too rare these days. Dave needs to break out the back in my day voice. And Tom says, so good to have a Dave and to have a Mike. These are the real ones.
Yeah.
Yes. And and it's well known. We go to an events and people come up and where's Mike? And I'm like, he's over there, go talk to him. And so, it's the same thing with you. When people would come up to the Libsyn booth, where's Dave or Rob, and they would,
Well,
Yeah,
that's one thing I missed. I didn't even think about it because it was always easy. I could say, hey, if you're coming to, Podcast Movement, I'll be at the Libsyn booth.
Yep.
And now people are like, how are we going to find you at these events? And I'm like, well, I guess hit me up on the app or whatever. But I loaded the Podcast Movement app today, and I've already got like 44 people like, can't wait. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be not as easy as I thought. Right. Yeah.
Have you guys, I think Podpage was at Podfest with a booth. Have you guys got a booth at Podcast Movement?
We do not, but I'll be there spouting this lovely shirt and walking around. And that's the thing that we're kind of at this point figuring out, like, where is the best place to put your ad money? And well, it's like it's a couple $1,000s and you're like, okay, I'm going to make that $20 a month at a time. You got to get some ROI on that. So we're figuring that out. And it may be a case. I actually thought about it. I said, well, what if we go halvesies? Have a Podpage / School of Podcasting booth, that type of thing. So we'll see. We're still at this point. It's noon. We're like, all right. Didn't think about that.
It's even us. We dropped NAB this year. It's because after I get that $20,000 bill paid for booth, airfare, food, hotel rooms, everything else, then where's that ROI? And if the ROI doesn't mean 20,050 or 25,000 or 40,000, and we spend a week there, it's not worth our time to go. So,
and yet I get it, because I would never have the stones, shall we say, to hold an event because you've got to book all these hotel rooms, and then if people don't show up, you're out of, it's like, well, you still got to pay for those hotels. So I'm like,
I get hammered all the time by my board where we get an ROI. So there's some events we have to go to.
Yeah.
There's, for us right now, there's 3 flagship events, and I essentially have to be at every year. Podfest, probably Podcast Movement Summer, and the Pod Show in London. Those are probably next year going to be the only 3 shows I'm going to do.
Well, there aren't going to be that many left. Joe Pardo, I just saw, he used to do the Indie PodCon, and I saw where he originally this year, he had a date set, and now last time I went there, he's like, yeah, we're not doing this year. So
it's hard to get people to these events. And then, for you guys have a much easier sell. Hey, this, you're not competing with hosting because, hosting is a commodity now. There's 30 people competing for hosting. And right now there's only 1 or 2 Podpage. Matter of fact, I can't figure out who podpage.io is and podpage.com. I think you're podpage.com.
Yeah,
right?
we are podpage.com. The other one is I think it's podcast page, whatever. But yeah. But
so you guys have a very small competition pool. So you guys are in a great spot.
Yeah. And it's, I've known like Brendan, it's kind of weird. We went through this weird podcasters roundtable with me, Ray, and Daniel, because my first meeting with Brendan, we figured it out, was on April 30th, 2020. And the guy that told him you should talk to Dave was Ray Ortega. And after he talked to me, he talked to Daniel J. Lewis. And I'm like, there you go, the 3 amigos. And I've known him ever since. And he would, I remember, I'm like, well, we need an about page. We need a contact page. We need an easy way to get the episodes on there. And he was like this. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly it. And he's like, okay, well, what else do you need to do? And I was like, he built Podpage like I advise people to make a podcast. Figure out who your audience is. Ask them, what do you want it to do? What do you need from the show? And then give it to them. Like with this show, I mean, with you guys, with the huge experience you both have and the insights and, Rob's Rolodex and Todd's experience with Blubrry customers, you guys give us a wide view of what's going on. And I always listen because, well, I listen for two things. My favorite thing to hear on the show is when Todd goes, I probably shouldn't say this, because I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And then, the other thing is just your insights, because you guys, we've seen when we had, back in the day, when I see somebody go, oh, I made this thing and it's going to take little snippets of this and blah. I'm like, oh, like Clamor? And they're like, what's a Clamor? And I'm like, do your research. You just made something that could never make any money. It had integration. I think it integrated with PowerPress at one point. And CLAMMR, because, E's are expensive. And, so when I see another Clamor come up on board, I'm like, yep, okay.
You've seen that before, right?
Yeah. There's a new media host, and he's got every 2.0 feature, and I forget what it is, but it's one guy in the basement, and his business model is unlimited bandwidth, unlimited episodes, unlimited everything. And I went, that's a bad business model, my friend. And he's like, what? And I go, I've seen that happen twice. I go, all it takes is one really popular show and you're done. And he was like, no, bandwidth is cheap. And I'm like, I've heard this before. And then he was on the Podcasting 2.0 show. And Adam Curry's like, that's not a good business model. Like, we've seen that before. So, and then of course, when I say stuff like that, they politely walk away and go, it's just an old curmudgeon. And I'm like, oh, there we go. The curmudgeon card gets pulled. And I'm like, but I've seen things.
And then when I have a customer that I've, had to unfortunately say, listen, you went commercial, you're using a petabyte of bandwidth. We need you, you have to move to a business plan. And then they say, well, and you give them that number, and they have some sticker shock, and you've discounted it as low as you can go. And then they go start looking around for a new home, and maybe they find a new home for a short period of time. But what I've often found is people that, have, and they're doing, if a show is on Blubrry, and still the rule is, if you're not running advertising, you're a non-commercial show and you're using 5 petabytes, well, that's on me. All right. I'm going to eat it. But if you start running ads in your show, then, okay, you're making money on that audience. So I'm going to go, and I very rarely have to do that. But oftentimes we'll find people will move. And where do they look for? They look for those free hosts, those people that have unlimited bandwidth, that have a little bit looser terms of service. Yeah. And they go over there and kill them. And it's not my fault. It's because I said, you need to pay me $1,500 a month.
People used to say with Libsyn, oh, they don't let you advertise because there was something in the terms. And it was simply for that situation. If you're killing us, we at least want the ability to go, would you mind playing some ads for us? And people always used to spew that, but it was like, there comes a time when it's like, okay, let's be fair here. They're killing us. Like, either help us make some money or, pay us some money, one or the other. And, at that point, if you have so many downloads that you should be able to monetize that.
Right.
I'm pretty sure.
So I wanted to take everybody back. Jody Craigle made a comment in here. It takes time to get a podcast process down. So this is the whole topic we were talking about earlier about, starting a podcast, and it takes time for some people to figure this out. And I know it's kind of a controversial place out there to say, well, some people say that you should produce, like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 episodes at the beginning when you launch. And then there's other people like myself that says, just start out with 1, because you're not going to have your process figured out for 6 episodes really in advance. I mean, you may find that you don't use all those episodes, but to kind of dovetail off of what Dave was saying about, knowing your audience, just like Jody's saying here, is that sometimes it takes quite a few episodes to find your groove, find what you're trying to accomplish with your podcast. And at what point is it the best point to really start getting that feedback to? Is it at episode 1 or is it episode 3? I mean, I guess it's going to vary, right? It depends on what kind of show you're trying to produce too, but this is a very complicated question for people to solve out there. And I'm not sure that there's really one answer to this.
Yeah, it's a podcast. So of course the answer starts with it depends. But
Right.
anytime it's either A, I'm going to start buying ads from my show. Well, hold on. Let's make sure it's going to resonate. Or I'm going to start promoting it on other shows. I'm going to do like, okay, that's a great
Yeah.
strategy because both are going to get you in front of podcast listeners. But before
Yeah.
we go promoting it,
Yeah.
maybe we should take some time to do that because she's right. It does take a while to kind of get comfortable behind the mic.
Yep.
But if we know who it's for, and then the other key is why am I doing this? And I
Mhm.
had someone at the School of Podcasting, and she's just a sweetheart. And we're going through, and I'm looking through her why, and her why was, well, I want to position myself as a subject matter expert. And I'm like, perfect. I go, but I looked at your last like 10 episodes, and you're doing interviews. I go, how does that position you as a
Right,
subject
as an
matter
expert,
expert?
right,
I go, I said, now that doesn't mean you shouldn't do interviews. I said, but you got to do, I call it the Jerry Springer. So if you guys remember Jerry Springer, people would be hitting each other with chairs and beating each other up. And at the end, there'd be some soft music and Jerry'd look into the camera and go, what did we learn today? And it'd be like, I learned that getting hit in the face with a chair leaves a bruise, and I'm always like, so after you talk to someone at the end of that, go, well, you know what I liked about that talk today with Rob, that one part where he said this, that reminds me of, and now you tell your story and you just ever so kind of nonchalantly remind the audience, it's my show. It's like, don't forget, I'm the expert here, because a lot of times they'll go, hey, don't forget newmediashow.com. Be sure everything's in the show notes, newmediashow.com. Thanks. You see you. Bye. And I'm like, wait a minute. The last website they heard was theirs. The last thing the audience should hear is your website. So there are things like that I'm like, yeah, you just, and it's not that person is dumb or, it's just like, I'm too close to the content to see that. I'm so happy it happened to me about probably 5 months ago. A student of mine, Kim New Loves, does the Pharmacist Voice podcast. And she said, Dave, do you know you have a typo in your podcast? And I go, well, which one? And she goes, well, the School of Podcasting. And I'm like, whoa, is it in like a show notes or something? She goes, no, it's in the podcast. I go, like, she goes, the title of the show. And I go, no. And I go over, plan, launch, grow, monetize. And I'd left out an E. And I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. So I just tell people we're all too close to our own content. And when you get somebody else from the outside to go, I don't understand what that means. It's helpful, but it is, I guess that would be my answer is when you're ready to promote it, before you go wasting your time and money, let's make sure it works.
I have a little different approach, but I do agree in one thing. What is the goal? What is the goal of the show? That's my first question when I get on with any podcaster now.
Right.
Before they even, what is your question? I ask them, what is the goal of your podcast? And, often we get that big, long pause, and I just keep my mouth shut, being the good salesman that I am, and wait for them to answer that question. But in these podcast gurus that say you need to do 7 episodes in advance and blah, 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 blah. I think the reason that a lot of shows fail is because they don't have time to breathe. In other words, let's do episode 1. Let's get it out. Let's breathe 3 or 4 days. Let's start planning on episode 2. We've learned some things. We've had some time to look at what the show's doing, what the response is. I've learned maybe to do some new social media posts, and let's get episode 2, and then let's kind of rinse, wash, repeat, and add some stuff. And by episode 6 or 7, you've learned more over a couple of months of time. You've built more confidence. You're getting a little feedback for the show, and by episode 7, you can start to do your adjustments to the content. If you just record so many episodes in the beginning and you put it out there, then you haven't had a chance to grow through the process of putting a show out on a episode by episode basis, on a week by week, and able to have the ability to do a little bit of an adjustment. So I'm very much against doing this preloading of a whole bunch of episodes. But boy, you listen to a lot of gurus, and that's exactly what they tell you to do. And if they have a plan to go along with that launch, in other words, all that stuff that they would have learned over 2 months, and condition that podcaster to be ready to do those 7 episodes at a huge dump, then that's great, but most of them don't.
Yeah, and I would say it also depends on what the experience of the podcaster is too.
Mm.
Have they done this before? Have they been through this process before and learned that it's probably not best to batch up a bunch of episodes, because that basically means that maybe you made, if you batched up 6 episodes in advance of your launch, that you made 6 episode mistakes or
Yeah.
you come across a situation where you regret publishing those, and that's an unfortunate outcome as well.
Tom
Yeah.
has a series of comments. He says, I wouldn't do any B this year. Well, it's already done and gone, so don't worry, we didn't. Dave nails the show. So maybe I shouldn't talk about what I want to talk about. Hit me with a chair. And also he says, Todd, you're right. But those first episodes should be placed under the bed first. That's interesting too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a guy
do
once
that.
that came to me. He's like, I'm already done. I got the episode. I just need to launch and promote. I'm like, great. And he had 52 episodes that had been exported as WMA files for those of you that are on Windows and remember like 19, whatever it was. And I was like, dude, these are not going to play in anything. I go, you have to convert these to MP3 files or M4A at least. I go, but WMA, I'm like, well, huh? And he's like, really? I'm like, and so we were looking for some tool that you could like drop in a folder and it would somehow reconvert it. But it was just somebody that started, I don't know where he got that advice, but that was wrong. And to Rob's point, if you do 10 episodes and 3 episodes in, somebody goes, man, I hate that lightning round thing you do. That every time that lightning sound effect comes in, it makes me wet my pants. And you're in your head, you're thinking, I have 7 more episodes with a lightning round in it. Like, oops. So that's why I'm like, get some feedback up front. And that doesn't always mean you have to, there are times that you'll get feedback from people that aren't your target audience. I do a Saturday show called Ask the Podcast Coach with Jim Collison. And this guy had done his homework. He's like, back in February on episode, whatever, you did this and you talked about this and like all these majorly detailed points. And he really wanted us to turn it into an interview show. And I was just kind of like, hey, thank you so much for the feedback. It's called Ask the Podcast Coach. It's kind of a call-in show. I'm like, this is not, the actor studio or whatever. So there are times when somebody will give you feedback and we have a name for that person. And it's not, it's that person is not my target audience. So you have to be careful with that. Because if you try to please everybody, I see people do that all the time too. Well, I'm going to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I'm like, yeah, that's not the best advice.
That's been a challenge with Blubrry, because we've been a jack of all trades. We have a PowerPress plugin for WordPress users. Now we have this dashboard and people get in there and go, which way do I go? So we've had to really work hard at that onboarding process to not get people stuck and get decision paralysis on, because sometimes it's, those very simple, okay, 2 or 3 real questions, and we kind of lead them down the path and get them in the bucket we think they should be in. But that's where Libsyn, Podbean, and other folks don't have that problem because they're a one-trick pony. They have one product and one dashboard, and they, there's not multiple ways of publishing. So, so that's always been a challenge with us.
Todd, that's a great segue to moving this conversation over to podcast websites, which is what was promoted for this episode. Is kind of that decision-making process that a podcaster goes through to decide what kind of website that they want to have. There's Podpage, there's WordPress, there's the website that's provided by Libsyn or any of the hosting platforms that are very limited or whatever. So, selecting these various options comes with a certain amount of work. Some come with more work than others. But, I know at the bottom line to this whole discussion is the real purpose that you have a website is for SEO, right? For getting found in the search engines and being a destination for your podcast that you can promote easily in your podcast. So Dave, why don't you start out a little bit and talk about, what it is about Podpage, do you think, and just from your experience, working at Libsyn, I worked at Libsyn too, and what you get from a host website versus what you get at Podpage. And then Todd, let's also talk about what you get through PowerPress and how that works with WordPress.
Sure.
Yeah, with any, and it doesn't matter if it's Captivate or Libsyn or whoever. Your basic came with the web host is a great place. It's super simple, and it's a great place to listen and follow the show. That's about it, and sometimes that's all you need. Podpage, we bring in your RSS feed, we bring over all your episodes, and you put in your links to here's Apple and Spotify and all that. So we've got the follow thing, but we also integrate with your email list. So now I want to do a little marketing. I want to catch up with those people, and it just looks better. There are some media hosts that are just like, okay.
Yeah.
So it looks better, a lot more customizable than something that comes with a media host. So we've got the email. We integrate with things like Patreon and Supercast. So if you want to promote that and PayPal and buy me a coffee and all that. So there's a lot of integrations with Podpage so that you can kind of add whatever you want. Now, if you start going, I want to do A/B split testing with some marketing and some other, like, okay, now you've graduated to WordPress. So, but the biggest thing, I remember Zeta Christian is a member of the School of Podcasting, and she said, hey, I hear about this Podpage thing. Can you walk me through it? And I'm like, sure. We put her RSS feed. She picked up a template. We picked her colors, a couple other things, and we were done in like 12 minutes. And she goes, I didn't think I could do this. And I go, yeah, when I say it's easy, it's really that easy. And so, and then from there, you just simply upload your file to your media host, type in your show notes, and there you go. And then, like, I'll do this. I will have kind of condensed show notes, because who's going to read War and Peace on the phone? So I'll have my opening paragraph and my links and my call to action. And then once that gets sucked into Podpage, I'll go in and add more paragraphs, because now I'm in the land of Google and I want to get my SEO going. And then there are other fun features, like Podpage has, we call it the episode signature, and it just adds at the end of every episode on your website. You can put a banner in there, whatever you want. And when you update that signature, it updates across the whole website. And then things like there's a /follow link. So that's already built in. There's a /voicemail link. So if you want to leave voicemail, so all these are based on your domain. So if you're like, hey, if you want to leave me a comment, just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/voicemail. And if you want to follow the show, askthepodcastcoach.com/follow. So a lot of those things that, people have to set up with either a pretty link or, whatever you're using, a lot of that is now built in. But there is a time when you want to do some sort of split test or whatever, just super duper customization. And that's where you move over to WordPress. And with that, I will toss it over to Todd.
Yeah, so I have up on the screen a screenshot of the Podpage experience off of a podcast that I have, just to give somebody a little visual on this. So,
And I think,
Todd, go ahead.
I think what we see is, if we look at how people find us, is about 90% of the folks that come to us that they've had WordPress forever. They've already had a website. They've already have established business, something that they've been doing for years. So they've decided to add a podcast to their business or their church or whatever it may be. They've added PowerPress, and they kind of come in that way. So about 90% of the folks that come to us initially have already got an established website. And then 10% of the folks that are onboarded through our platform then make the decision whether or not they just want to have a landing page or if they want to have the WordPress site that we provide. So that kind of splits then. But again, it's not like the majority of people that come to us, again, are already WordPress users. It's not someone has come to us and decide, oh, I'm going to put up a WordPress site. Most people don't. People that's coming in brand new, they don't have any presence whatsoever. They often just opt for a landing page because it's simple. It's easy. You just set up your account. Really, you do your onboarding. You're ready to create your episode. You're done. And submit your podcast to Apple Podcasts. You're really that easy. And then over time, what will happen is, and it's the same thing that happens to people that are on platforms like Spotify and other places like that are basically limited in they decide that they want to graduate. So there's a huge percentage of folks that are coming over to use specifically WordPress that have been kind of stuck on a a template, let's just say, and they want to have more control. So very, very few people that have no website whatsoever opt for WordPress out of the gate, because it's a big step to do that, and people get intimidated real easy. But then again, what we see is this graduation process. So that's where, today we spend a lot of time, have been spending a lot of time on improving the dashboard and the dashboard experience, because we know that that's where, a lot of the folks that are getting their first exposure to having any kind of website are going to land, and then we'll work them through the process of graduating into something that they can control and have their own domain on and have that domain authority. So I can understand where Dave's, and I would also say, if I hadn't found Blubrry, it would be one of those situations where if you're on a platform that has a limited dashboard website, you can become frustrated with that very, very quickly. And let's be frank, all of the hosting platforms, including us, could do a lot better job with the sites we give podcasters straight out of the gate. If we did that, Podpage would not be doing as well as they did, but we don't. So that's a weakness, and that's something that Podpage has been able to exploit, and good on them for doing that.
Yeah, on that topic here, I wanted to show what a provided website is from a host. So Libsyn, more specifically here on this case, just so those watching this can see. Yeah. So this is a web page that's provided by Libsyn to a podcast. So,
And that's really nothing to get excited about.
No, and again, that's a great place to, follow the show. Normally, here's the fun thing: you have to go into Libsyn 4 to put in the link for your Apple, so that'll show up on that page. Right. But it's a great place to listen and follow. So that's a great example, and you can change the color scheme there. So it looks okay, and it's fine if this is, all I want people to do is listen and follow. But if you wanted to put an email list on that, you'd have to either put a link in your top description there that you can customize and things like that. So it's not a bad site. It's just, it's easy to outgrow.
Yeah.
And to exactly my point, if you went over and looked at a Blubrry page, it would be, it would not be as enthralling as a Podpage site. So,
well, the other thing that Rob, you said, why do we have a website for SEO? But I think I'm with Todd. I'm a little worried about the AI answers coming up in Google and all these other places, to where if there's only one answer and it's not you, how do you tell your audience where to find you? Because they're not going to find you via search engine. And so I'm like, you can't say find me wherever you find podcasts. I've got multiple videos on how that just doesn't work. There are search in certain apps. There was one I typed in the exact name of the show and it didn't show up. And there were all sorts of things. It was like home pro something, home fixer pro or something. Nothing there. You had to type the author's name to have it show up. And there were all sorts of things that were neither pro nor home that were showing up in the search results. So to me, you need a website, or bare minimum a domain that points at something to get people there, because I'm not super worried about the AI results in SEO, but there's a part of me that goes, that has me, okay, I'm watching that, because I've seen some really bad results come from that. And I don't want to have just 3 results. I'm not a control freak, but I'm a guy that will go to page 2 of Google results to see what else is there, because the first 70% of Google results are now paid for. And so to me, you need a website just so people can find you. Again, going back to being an old curmudgeon, I remember mp3.com. And I remember when that site was huge and there were people making a living selling their music on mp3.com, to where they just say, hey, go to mp3.com/Dave. And then it got sued and sold and sued and sold. And then all of a sudden, all those people had the audience just knew to go to mp3.com/Dave, and they had no way to find these people, because this is the early days of the internet, where if that person had a website and an email list, you can take down mp3.com and I can still talk to my audience.
oh, I don't know why that particular page is showing.
Oh, yeah, I brought it up. It's a chat, a GPT query that
I
I
was going
pulled
to
up.
share I was going to share a screen. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I typed into the query top podcasts about podcasting just to see, if a person went in and did a search query, kind of like what you would do in Google, what chat GPT would show us. So here I'll click on it. It says top.
Oh, look at that.
Wow. How did you make that happen,
Now,
Rob?
come on, the podcast
I
report
didn't do
hasn't.
anything. I didn't do anything.
But
Yeah.
I mean, look, we love Paul Colligan, but he hasn't had an episode of the podcast report out in about 3 years.
And then there's the school of
Podcraft, there's a go.
podcasting. Yeah.
I'll take that. Colin, that's good. She
Right.
Podcast, great show, but we don't know if
Yeah.
that's coming back.
Yeah.
Evo Terra, yeah, can't go wrong with it. But again, Evo hasn't put out an episode. He's doing his book stuff now.
But the problem with this is that there's no links to any of these
There's no
things.
links to any of that. Yep.
That's the key takeaway here. Now, if you were to do this in Bing, I think you would get links.
Yeah. Yeah, I switched to Bing. The results, it's weird because I started using Google because I hated using Hotbot and Lycos and Dogpile and all the other, you had these meta search engines that would be a search of search engines. And so Google came along and it was fast and the results were great. And now I'm going to Bing because the search results are better. And, so what is
Yes, I
this?
had to ask it to
Yeah.
provide links, and it did.
So, Rob, bring up the screen that I shared. See if we get the
Yeah.
right one.
Okay.
What we did is because so many podcasters were, they were hot and heavy on sharing like a link tree page or something like that.
Right.
We basically put something together that was similar to a link tree page, but was more podcast centric. So this is something we put together that all our podcaster gets. It's called a quick links page, and it's the landing pages end up being podcast.show/your keyword. So again, it's one of those things that a podcaster gets to, again, we're just trying to help folks that don't have any web skills of having something that looks a little nicer. Again, it's just kind of a landing page. You can play your podcast there, latest episode and so forth. But I think that it's an education process with podcasters. You can bring it down, Rob.
Okay.
But
And you got that subscribe button in the upper right-hand corner, so that's good.
so and it's mobile ready and everything else. But I think too, in the end, it goes back to, with Podpage, at least you can have your domain mapped over there.
Yep.
And that's a biggie, and that's 90% of it is, again, building your brand on your .com and a place that you can point people to within your show, because it's really hard for people to say, okay, go to blubrry.com / blah blah blah, or go to podcast.show / blah blah blah, when you can say, and if you can score a domain, it's much, much easier just to give them a straight domain, something easier to remember. And again, then you can focus the content on the website to write for Google, because your podcast listeners are not going to come over there unless they want to sign up for, get merch, or sign up for your email list, or, they're going to be very rare to come to the website. But in a pinch, they're going to remember, oh yeah, the new media shows at newmediashow.com, Geek News Central is at Geek News Central, the School of Podcasting is the School of Podcasting.com. They're going to remember those website domains. They're going to come find Dave or Todd or Rob or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's one of those things with SEO. The more you do, the more you get. And I've seen people that, and they don't know it. It's not, and they'll take. I know Blubrry has. I think every media has this, where you can have a player with multiple episodes.
Yeah.
And so they'll do it and they'll set it and forget it, and they don't realize that iframe isn't technically, like, it's on their site, but it looks like it's on their site, but really you're getting zero SEO from that. And I'm always like, treat every episode like a blog post. So, just, start a post in WordPress if that's what you're using or whatever, copy and paste the code for the player, 10 seconds later, you're done. And people are like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, but
It-
this, I don't have to do anything. And I'm like, yeah. And you're getting 0 for that.
we had been heavily resistant in providing a persistent playlist. But finally, the demand got so high because
Yeah.
people say, I just want to have a page on my website where the latest episode is just there. And then you're just like, okay, you've got your own .com already, and you're just going to have one persistent page with a playlist player there. That is not helping you, like you said. And you can lead a sheep to water, but you can't force or horse to water, and you can't make them drink. So all you can do is advise, and it doesn't become critical until they call you and say, "Oh, my show's not growing,"
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Oh, well, let's have ugly baby talk."
So, guys, do we think that as we see the AI platforms kind of get greater adoption and usage versus like maybe Google search, do we see links being a part of that, or do you guys see the web starting to be depreciated over time, and that chat GPT becomes much more kind of much more multimodal, which would be multimedia,
It's already
right?
happening.
Right. So it starts to generate results that have video and have audio embedded in them. So what do you guys think?
Well, Bing has already switched now so that the AI results are first and the search results are in a sidebar. So that's for select users. They're starting to roll that out. So if you
Mhm.
use Bing, you're going to type, what is the best tech podcast, and it's going to give you its
Right.
AI answer. Then it's going to give you the search results on a sidebar. So it's already happening. It's a doomsday scenario, not just for podcasters, but also businesses. This is really going to be a very tumultuous time. Where businesses were built on the web, AI may destroy businesses on the web.
Yeah. The thing that this keeps going through my head every time, and I sound very anti-AI, and I'm not. There's some things that AI does that I'm like, that's amazing. I just don't think creating content is one of them. And I see it all the time where it's like, upload your video and it will create 100 snippets for you. And I'm like, yeah, but is it any good? I just ask it a question and it'll spit out this thing. Okay, but is it any good? And it's not that it's bad. I've yet to see something where I go, wow, didn't know that. It always seems very surface. Chat GPT, how do I lose weight? Oh, the studies have found if you eat less and exercise more, your weight in pounds will fall off. And I'm like, okay, but I knew that. It always seems very high level, nothing super detailed. Or like we just saw, it recommended 2 podcasts there that aren't podcasting anymore. And I'm like, I kind of wanted, you really have to put your trust in it. And so I know I've used a lot of AI tools, and I'll give you an example. Last week, I talked about Bon Jovi and Taylor Swift on a podcast because both of them know exactly who their audience is, and they write music to make young girls cry, basically. And yet I ran it through a couple different things. None of them, I said, I want my episode title to be something like 4 podcast lessons from Bon Jovi, just enough that people go, from Bon Jovi, what? Got to click on that. And none of the AI tools even mentioned Bon Jovi. And I'm like, we talked about him for 12 minutes at the beginning of the show. And then when they I'm like, here, make my chapters. And I guess I'm going to have to start saying, I'm changing topics now so that AI knows I'm changing topics.
Dave,
Yeah.
come on over and we'll get your account set up. Come over.
That's it. Well, that's what I want to see, because and really, to be fair, Ask the Podcast Coach is an AI nightmare, because by the time that show is over, we go where the audience wants to go. So it's 90 minutes of us talking about everything. It's this show, kind of.
It has a hard time with this show too.
Yeah. So that's not really fair to bash that. But I have done other like, oh, this should be really easy for AI. And I go, yeah, it did it. But I'm like, is it any good? I'm like,
So
it's okay.
it's like when I create the chapters files for this show, it gives me like 6 or 7. And it goes back to this adage I've used forever. AI is not a replacement for common sense. You need to look at the output, right? Now, as in regards to my tech show, where I'm changing a topic, a different news story, oh, it's beautiful. It comes up with 30 chapters, perfectly timed. There might be a few weirdos in there. I just delete those. So again, it's really about the context of a show. So if a show is very well structured, in other words, it spends time on a topic, switches a topic, the AI has no problem breaking out those chapters. But like this show, yeah, good luck. It's gonna be like, well, they talked about this and they came back to this and then they talked about this again. And so yeah, it's gonna have a hard time on it. Thankfully, we're using the stupidest AI or large language model that we'll ever use at this point. But some tools do better than others. And this is what we found. I worked for 2 months trying to get the model we're using to build to do clip creation, to say, okay, here's the real highlight. Here's the juicy stuff from a show that we want to be able to create clips from. And it was just failing left and right. So we switched models and it got better. But then I said, okay, instead of trying to give me 10 clips, just find me 3. And then we'll let the podcaster go find other clips. It could find 3. It couldn't find 10. So
that's
it's
telling.
Not perfect. It's not perfect.
Well, I don't think that's the AI.
Well,
that's
maybe
saying, here are the 3.
Content.
Yeah, here are the 3 good things we found out of an hour-long show. I'm like, well,
yeah,
if the shoe fits, yeah.
Well, and that actually raises a really good point, because I do think that these platforms, YouTube included, just like what I've had to do with this show to some degree, is pick out one main topic, right, that is highlighted to help promote the show, to drive people's interest, right? But what people will find when they come to the show is that we don't talk about that topic until like 50 minutes in, right?
It's smorgasbord of stuff.
Right. It's just a bunch of other stuff that gets thrown in there, because these discovery platforms don't really give us the ability to really promote multiple topic formats.
So what I've done with my tech show is I lead with the story I think is going to be the juiciest for the episode title. And then my header for the show is that juicy episode or juicy topic. And then the other 29 things I talk about is buried. But the difference is I try to cover the juicy topic within the first 3 minutes of the show, so that people don't have to wait too long to get to it if they came there for that specific topic. But podcasts are a different animal. We don't create, well, some podcasters do create very short YouTube-ish type of content where it's very focused. That's where probably YouTube has an advantage, is these very tight focused topics that people how to change a tire on a car or whatever it may be. That's why they win in that regard, because you got a 3 minutes video on how to change a tire safely, where you don't do a podcast on how to change a tire safely in 3 minutes. So,
well,
it's a different animal.
But there are podcasts or YouTube shows essentially that will take a focused topic and they'll spend 2 hours on it, right? So it's the ultimate in deep dive. So, obviously they'll stray into other derivative topics as well, but there are examples of long form, singular focused topic shows that are successful on YouTube. And I'm not sure that as is much the case in podcasting. It's just an interesting contrast that's going on that side. So I wanted to just kind of change the topic a little bit here and talk a little bit about true fans. I don't know if you guys got the email about true fans turning on Stripe and being able to pay with credit cards to people. I don't know if you guys have heard about that or if you have an opinion on that. But
you're obviously not listening to the Podcasting 2.0 show, Rob.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
So it's experimental. Well, what basically he has done is he's pushing ahead, but there over the last 2 weeks there's been major headway done because what happened is GetAlby doesn't want to. The wallet business in America today is strife with the legal implications because of the Fed and money laundering and this other stuff. So non-custodial wallets and custodial wallets, we don't need to go on that discussion. It's just basically has made GetAlby more challenging to use from a podcaster and listener standpoint. So what's going to happen And what Sam has really introduced there is, and what everyone will go to here probably the next month and a half, once the logistics gets figured out, is a much more simpler transaction method that basically you pay on with fiat funds, with a Stripe
Right.
account, or maybe even Cash App, or it all depends, but mostly probably Stripe. You put $10 in, you send some dollars to a podcaster, and it arrives in sats to the podcaster, and the sats easily transfer out of the podcaster into fiat funds. So that's like the 10,000 foot view. It's much more complicated than that, but they're working. Sam just is rushing forward as fast as he can to get stuff implemented, and I applaud him on it. But I'm going to wait till the spec gets finalized and they make sure they got all the I's dotted and T's crossed to be able to implement it, so that we can make it easier for podcasters and listeners to participate in a portion of
Todd,
the value.
let's get this straight on what's happening here. So he's enabled the ability to use Stripe, Apple, and Google Pay or credit cards to be able to fund the purchase of Satoshis through the True Fans website's relationship with Alby, right? Is that kind of how
Well,
that's working?
When
Just-
I do it, I go over, and because I've used Stripe before, it somehow knows my credit card, which is cool, and sometimes
scary at the same time.
Yeah. But it knows me, and it's like, do you want to buy $10 worth of US dollars of Satoshis? And I go, yep. And it goes, okay, bring, here it is. And at that point, and
Also, Stripe will actually
Yeah.
give you the ability right in their interface to purchase Satoshis.
And at
Okay.
that point, I go into True Fans, and I can see where however many thousands of Satoshis that bought. And I'm
Mhm.
like, cool. And even if I'm not using True Fans, if I have a, Get Alby wallet, so if I'm listening in Cast-O-Matic, I put the money in via Sam. So I'm assuming Sam takes a cut of that. He should. And then I just start streaming them to everybody else. And so what I've kind of heard is more people need to do that, because if we have just one person being the wallet company, then there's so much money going through that wallet that it might, raise the eyebrow of the government to like, hey, what's going on over there? But if every hosting company or, podcast company or whoever took a share of that, then it's not going to be hopefully
Well,
Well, it could be
What-
flagged.
what's ultimately going to happen is we're going to be completely legal. And again, what Sam has done. I'm not going to do wallets. But there might be a master wallet that we would have, but there would be essentially bookmarks in there. And then you'd have to trust Blubrry. There's going to be bookmarks in there that says, okay, Dave has X number of Satoshis. And, so again, I don't know the full logistics of it. I might be talking out of my ass here on exactly how it's going to work. But again, I'm going to let the podcasting 2.0 gurus figure it out, write the spec, give us the instructions, show us the demo. The Fountain folks are working on the use case and give us a demo site. And once that's all figured out, then we will proceed. But I'm not going to change horses in the middle of the stream until there is something where there is basically we've proven the end chain works. And instead of streaming by the minute, probably what it's going to be cash. So in other words, the Fountain is probably going to do a transaction, every 5 or 10 minutes and send 10 minutes worth of streaming sats, because this new method that they're going to go to is what's the word I want to use? It's not lightweight. I can send, in the current model, I can send 10 sats a minute and it's not an issue. But there's a little more overhead. I guess that's a better way to say it, in sending payments, not in a cost perspective, but just an overhead in the process that's required. But at the same time, it's easier, and there's some terms being used about some 11 series and some 12. Again, it's super geeky stuff. But we'll let Adam and Dave and the gang figure out the way ahead. Then we're going to move forward.
So if you purchase Satoshis through Stripe, that's going to be held inside of your Stripe account. So there's going to have to be some way to be able to migrate that into, let's say, a TrueFans or
We'll back up a
type
bit.
of platform.
Yeah. When I give my money through Stripe, I'm buying Satoshis that are stored in my Get Alby wallet.
Okay.
So that's where the money goes. And what Sam has done is, because you can't.
Okay, but you already had a Get Alby account,
Right.
Where
And
if you're
so,
a U.S. citizen now, you can't get a Alby
right.
account if
But
you're
that's
getting a
where,
new one. Right.
yeah. So Sam is now like, hey, I'll make you a wallet if you can't
Right.
get one over there. And then somehow that wallet ties into Get Alby. So he's kind of like, Get Alby's like, we don't want that. And Sam's kind of like, well, hold on. I'll be between you and everybody else. Is how I kind of understood that.
And again, Sam's going to do Sam things to make things work. He's got a business to run.
Yeah.
I think ultimately the process will get much easier for everyone once this new method is in place. And it's probably what we should have done in the very beginning, but it was probably didn't exist at that time. So, like anything else, it's a moving target. And I don't even want it. I probably sound like probably Adam's throwing stones at his computer screen right now, because I probably described it all wrong.
Probably. I will
Well,
again
it
say,
depends
I
on
don't
if
know.
it's, what it's doing now or what we would like it to be, right?
Well, we want it to be easy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think we all want that, right? And that's why we're talking about it here, is that, it has to be talked in the industry about what's going on here and how anybody can take advantage of this. I mean, it's been fairly complicated up until now.
Well,
for
the
people
key
to
is
comprehend.
we're hopefully unraveling all of that, and give us a month or two, and I think there'll be a solution in place that will be easy for listeners, and they'll be able to operate in fiat funds. They won't have to do this stupid math and then figure out what a Satoshi is. And I think in the end, we'll be able to make it all work.
Yeah. It needs to be easy and simple.
And it's not going to involve the listener's not going to think he's buying. My understanding is it's transparent in that it's not like they think they're buying crypto. I didn't even, again, maybe I'm talking out of my ear here, but listen to episode 185 starting at 35-minute mark, podcasting 2.0. I haven't got to 186 yet, so I don't know what they've said on 186.
The last one was they were at a crypto event, and it was really cool because there are all these musicians on stage, and you could see booths.
Right?
You could see these booths going up on screen and things like that. So it sounded like it wasn't so much like, here's what we're doing. It was just like, in the future, it was like, here's what's happening now. This is cool, and these musicians are making money, and they're doing the live concerts and all sorts of. And Dovidas from I think it's RSS Blue, was doing a bunch of stuff, and they were live streaming. It was just one of those things where it's cool, but if somebody said it's just a bunch of nerds going, can we do this? Let's see if we can do this. And then they did, and you're like, that's pretty amazing. So that's the fun stuff. Then you're like, okay, now how can we do this without it using Band-Aids and paper clips and,
And how can we get it so that people that don't know how to right click a mouse can participate?
Right. Exactly.
I don't think we'll ever get there.
And Rob, you haven't. I mean, Dave, you good luck on that first call. I know you used to get those over at Libsyn, but
my favorite was when I said, all you need to do is copy this code and paste it into your website, and your player will show up. And they emailed me back and said, what do you mean copy and paste? And I was like, challenge accepted. And I was like, and thankfully I just got an Loom account. And I was like, I can show them how to do this.
That's why I say screen share is the only answer to that. Right.
Yeah, it was crazy.
But can they do a screen share is the next question.
Well, that's it. That's the thing you forget. You're like, oh, just hop on the Zoom call. And then, you're sitting there seeing the little bottom line, waiting for audio to connect. And you're like, oh, okay. I see where we're at.
In Blubrry, we have this secret channel that the devs use. I mean, not the devs, the support guys use. And I was given access to it. It's called Rant. Yeah.
Oh, let me guess what the beginning of every sentence starts with. I'm working with a consultant.
There is about 1,000 of those in there. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah. But I think, thank God for Dave, and thank God for Mike and my Dave and Sean and because if we didn't have those guys taking care of the customers, they wouldn't want to talk to Todd because we would probably have no customers left because I would probably be saying things to them that would make them quit and find an account somewhere else. So thank God that we have 3 gentlemen that are very, very patient.
I spent 45 minutes one night with my a pastor at my church that retired, and this is why he was retiring. And all I was trying to do was getting him to start an email and attach his document that he was retiring. And it took me 45 minutes because he couldn't find the file. Then we found the file, and it was just like, and after about a half hour, I started to feel the hair on the back of my neck. Like, okay, he's getting to me a little bit. Hold on, we can get there. We can do this. It's not all puppy dogs and rainbows. There are times when you're like, oh, this guy's getting to me. Okay, all right, challenge accepted. I can do this. So it's fun.
So who's picking up in your steed over at Libsyn? Is that going to be Rob? Is he picking up, or who has?
Yeah,
to pick up?
Well, Rob, because it was me and Rob were handling pro accounts. So when I left, it was Rob, and I know
Rob Walsh. We should
Rob Walsh. Yeah, yeah, and I know a few people. Like I see. I don't want to say who applied because if they don't get it, then it looks bad. But I knew a few people like, so you left. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, would you take that job? I'm like, here's what it does. Here's what I liked. Here's what I didn't like. And so I know a few people that applied for it. So I don't know.
Well, I'll look forward to picking up a few pro accounts before that new employee.
So, but yeah, poor Rob. I felt bad because I was like, well, you can just take somebody from support, and he's like, maybe not. We'll see. So, but they do have some things coming down the pike. So I'll be interested to see if I don't think they're going to get it rolled out before Podcast Movement, but they got some new things coming down the road. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I was happy to see the Canadian company Pacific Content got picked up by a startup called Lower Street, which I thought was interesting. That who company was saved.
You know who works at Lower Street? I did not know this. Shannon from Podbean.
Oh, I didn't realize that either.
Yeah, because she was like, "Hey, we shared a headline today," and I was like, "I didn't know you worked there." So
I didn't either. Yeah.
I didn't know that I had no idea where she went.
Yeah. That's why I was
like, I know
well,
that she moved to Spain for a while. So she lived in Spain for a while.
Was that company on their last legs, or what was?
They were going to go out of business. Steve Pratt over there was the founder of it. He just wasn't going to be supported by their parent company anymore, which I can't remember who the parent company was. I don't know, Todd, or Dave, if you remember, but
I don't. And I know there were 2 guys. The other guy, I forget the name of his company, but he's like a podcast growth specialist.
Harry Morton was the CEO of Lower Street.
I remember him.
Yeah.
So
it's a good company. His Lower Street company is basically a podcast kind of development and production company is what it is. So that's the company that acquired them.
So if they were a good company, why were they going out of business?
I think their parent company wanted to kind of
someone else
close them down.
That's what happens a lot. Companies get bought up and then they're not given the resources they need to grow or survive.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe that's what happened. And I think we're seeing quite a bit of this stuff going on in lots of different industries right now, where there's just not, capital is expensive and hard to get. And so if a company needs to get financial resources, they have a hard time doing that to continue operations if they need it.
Yeah. Cash is expensive right now. Very, or loans or investments.
Yep.
Yeah, that free money is long gone.
Yeah, and I also saw that Magellan AI put out some stats around ad spending has increased 22% year on year. Todd,
Did you see James Cridland's response to that on LinkedIn?
No, I don't think I saw it.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Well, because it's mixing two different things together here. It says, but the amount of ads in podcasts has decreased 20%. So what that tells me is that maybe there's more spending going into um, a smaller number of shows.
Or
Well,
that, and
go ahead.
I know I've seen a couple shows that I know of that their one and only monetization strategy is ads, and they either added 1 or 2 episodes a week, and I was like, that's kind of shows that the price of ads is coming down when people are like, I got kids to feed, so here's another new episode. Now we do this on whatever day, and I was like, that's interesting. So
That's something YouTubers are really famous for.
yeah.
I always can see when revenue is down, all of a sudden I see the pace of shows being released is increased and they're doing more shorts. I can see it's really a trend that is pretty telling is when the pace goes up.
Well, I always thought I know Blubrry, Libsyn, a bunch of these places, you built systems to take in ads, and I'm like, so the inventory got huge. So if I'm a sponsor, I can go to this person and go, I will give you this much money to sponsor your show, and they go, oh, no, that's not enough. All right, I'll just go to the next one and the next, and eventually somebody's going to say, I'll take that. And I think it was Ross Brand asked for a prediction. I go, the price of podcast advertising is going to go down because somebody's going to say yes, they're going to take that. And I'm like, I feel like we should all get together and go, hold the price, everyone hold.
That's collusion. Be careful.
Yeah. So yeah, that is true.
But I will
So I
say
had,
this: we
oh,
had our
sorry.
biggest programmatic month ever, though, today. I got
Nice.
the report in, so programmatic is still doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had Glenn Rubenstein on my podcast tip show this past week, and he's the CEO of Adopter Media, which is an ad sales platform for brands selling into podcasts. And he was telling me that a lot of the CPMs that we see kind of claimed in the podcast medium of like $23, $24 CPMs is actually not what the real CPM is right now. It's actually quite a bit lower. So it could be, I don't know why those numbers are getting put out like that, but he was telling me that on the show that it was more in the 20 range is where he's seeing the averages right now for host reads. So it's I just think that the news that we hear, we kind of have to take a little bit with a grain of salt as compared to what may be really going on.
I'm a firm believer here that this is a situation where I don't think the long-term prognosis is great for the advertising model within podcasting.
Yeah.
A small number of shows, just like on YouTube, do very, very well, where the majority of shows eat sawdust. So until we can monetize the 40% of the top 50 as long as if we can monetize 40% of shows globally, we could add another $1 billion to advertising revenue. But it's been almost 20 years, and the advertisers are never going to come into those smaller shows unless you have a boutique seller that is willing to do that extra work.
Yeah. I watched it was really long. I watched the GARM discussion with the guy from Daily Wire. I forget his name, but that whole thing. And I feel really stupid, but I'm like, couldn't this just be solved by the podcaster saying the following opinions do not necessarily represent those of the sponsor?
Only Jimmy Kimmel can say that.
Yeah, I'm like, why? Because I realize on one hand, people go, well, yeah, but people are still going to sue you. And I'm like, well, then what does GARM do? Like, people, I don't know, that whole part just makes my brain hurt. But I'm just like, because I hear Tom putting out all these great reports about how well, podcasters are trusted, and it's the number one way of selling over radio and TV. It's like podcasting are knocking it out of the park. And yet I'm hearing, yeah, we're not filling our inventory. And I'm like, how can that be? And I'm like, and then, well, people are worried about brand safety. And I'm like, can't we just put a little disclaimer at the beginning? Like that seems to solve that, but I must be missing something.
Yeah, it gives brands, another lever against either price levels or being able to run a campaign on a particular podcast that maybe doesn't align with the values of the brand. So in some ways, and we've talked about this on this show too, is there's a reduction in CPMs oftentimes that are driven based on these GARM ratings of content within podcasts. So it's being used as a lever. And
yeah,
Glenn and I talked about that on the podcast too.
If we could fill the 250 to 300 million downloads that are not monetized on Blubrry every month, I'm going to tell you, it would be life-changing. Not only for the company, it'd be life-changing for podcasters too.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we see the development of a value for value type of a model as a possible kind of replacement or something for advertising in the long run.
I would, value for value, and we had Matt on. He was in the chat room here earlier, or I think he still is, Matt Medeiros, and the value for value thing. Matt's video that he did really did a great job, and I apologize. I don't think I ever got it in the show notes. I missed the link or something to that effect. But if you go to valueforvalue.info, value the letter 4 value.info, and really understand what's being said there, it's a completely change of mindset. And podcasters have to understand that the value piece on this is you have to provide value.
Yeah.
You have to give valuable content. Hopefully what we've said today has been valuable. And if you think the value was great today, then great. Go over to newmediashow.com and we got a PayPal link and send us some money for that value. But again, you have to give value to get value back.
Yeah, that's step one. I have on my next episode of the School of Podcasting, I'll be playing a clip that somebody just sent me over Facebook. Vincent Pugliese, he who hasn't had it, he kind of took a break from his podcast, so it's been at least a year. And he said this guy contacted me and said, "Hey, do you want to see the Eagles in the Sphere in Vegas?" And he's like, "Man, I love the Eagles. That'd be amazing." He's like, "Great." He goes, "You've given me so much value from your podcast that it's changed my business and changed, and I just want to give back." And I'm like, that is value for value. I was like, there you go. So he's going to go see the Eagles in Vegas. And I was like, that's amazing.
So what that guy did was he gave back in time, talent, or treasure. And he used his treasure to give value back in the form of some tickets. So, and not everyone can give treasure. So like if you're a listener of this show, or a viewer of this show, and you like what you do, again, you can contribute your time, your talent, or your treasure. We always need people to help promote the show. Time, if you got time, let us know you got time to help the show. We can put you to work for sure. We'll give you some stuff to do. And if you're too busy in life and you say, I love what you guys do, then the treasure piece is great. Rob and I have never done advertising on this show. So, we do it for the love of the podcasting space. But boy, I tell you, those little donations that come in once in a while are sure nice.
Newmediaexpo.com. No, not New Media Expo. Sorry.
Newmediashow.com.
Wow, there's a phrase I haven't said in a long time.
Yeah, I think newmediaexpo.com.
Maybe we should start our own expo, Todd.
No. Rob, if you want to organize it, I'll show up. But I'm doing nothing other than that.
There you go.
We could be like the All In podcast and have our own New Media Show Summit, right?
Yeah. Well, Dave, now that you're that you're off on your own, we'll have to have you on more. You have to come over and tell us what's new over at Podpage. We don't bite people when they tell us about new stuff. It's always exciting.
Yeah. Happy to. That's the thing. It's like, it's funny because I can network now with people that are other media hosts, and I'm trying to network with other podcast consultants because there's an affiliate program for Podpage, and they're kind of like, wait a minute, you're kind of in like, we're competitors now. And I'm like, well, no, like I'm not here to steal your audience or whatever. So yeah, it's fun to
as long as you guys don't get in the hosting business, we can stay friends.
No, and And Brendan has said, I do
Wow.
not want to be a media. He's had
I
people
know, he
request
actually
that.
said that, right?
Yeah, he's like,
on the
nope, we
webinar,
don't do
right.
that. We're not an email. We'll help you collect email addresses, but we're not an email list. You know, we make it easy to integrate and things like that. So, but yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's been fun.
Yeah,
Well, thanks,
absolutely.
Dave. I appreciate it. Yeah.
And
Awesome.
congrats on your new gig.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
So far, loving every minute of it. So
That's the
All right.
key.
Yeah.
And my son just recently, he shared with me, he got a trip to Alaska and he went up on a photo shoot for an automotive event. And it was one of his first paid gigs. And while he didn't get paid a lot, he got airfare, transportation, hotel, food, blah, blah, blah. And he's young. And I'm just like so proud of him. I said, man, you building your, your resume, you're building that. And he got himself he become the lead creator for a new company in Hawaii. And I'm just like, he said, it was fun. I said, well, if going to work can be fun, I said, very few people can say that they wake up in the morning and go to work and have fun. And I said, it's not working when it's fun. And for me, sometimes I feel it's not fun, but I still have fun in the podcasting space. So Dave, as long as you wake up and happy and having fun, you have less gray hair. Of course, I think you're already there.
yeah, I've one spot in my mustache that won't turn gray, but other than that, I'm pretty much done in that department. So
Oh, boy.
Yeah, you're keeping your hair, so it's doing okay there.
kinda. It used to be down here. It's I'm like, if I get my mom or my dad's side of the genes, it'll stay. If I get my mom's side of the genes, I'll be shaving my head. So we'll see what happens here.
Well, maybe some changes here next week, Rob. I don't know if I'll be ready. I'm going to do my best effort, but probably 2 weeks from now, if of course, podcast movement might interrupt some of this. But I'm eyeing the space, and there's a magic transformation that's going to happen in here. And
Okay.
I hit my Amazon and B&H and spent a bunch of money today to prepare for the. Of course, I'm not paying rent, so it's kind of
That'll save you
know,
some money. Yeah.
yeah, relatively inexpensive. So we're gonna hodgepodge this together. I'm gonna do a poor man studio, and we'll see how
Okay.
it goes.
So we're on for next Wednesday too.
Yeah,
Okay.
unless there's some other thing that's coming up, I think we're good.
Okay. Sounds good. So Dave, what's the best way for people to reach out to you or contact you or find your stuff?
Yeah, my stuff is the best place is schoolofpodcasting.com. If you want to see everything I do have a Linktree site, as much as I hate those things, but this is the only time I use it. If you want to see everything I do, go to powerofpodcasting.com.
Okay. Awesome. And Todd?
I'm geeknews@gmail.com or Todd@blubrry.com, at Geek News on X, and at geeknews@geeknews.chat on Mastodon. And for those of you that are not yet subscribed to the Podcasting 2.0 show, please join the boardroom. I think there's enough conversation going on there that it gets pretty geeky. But if you're trying to figure out what the heck I'm trying to decipher, go back a few episodes and listen to those episodes. I think you'll get a more insightful explanation of what's changing and what's going to be moving forward in Podcasting 2.0.
And Todd's company is at this domain name,
Blubrry.com without the E's. We couldn't afford the E's. They're very expensive.
Right. And I can be found on X at Rob Greenlee. You can send me an email if you want, rob.greenlee@gmail.com. Happy to hear from you. And thanks everybody for being with us for the last hour and 43 minutes. That's quite a long show for us. But Dave, thank you so much for being here with us. I appreciate it. Good luck to your coaching and stuff like that with Podpage. I think it's awesome. It's an awesome move for you. And Todd, it's great to see you again too, and to see you back in the United States. So,
yeah. And
right.
thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.